have it already queued up.
Nkozia.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I'm super excited to get into the conversation, especially during a time that there's a lot of conversation around reparations. We have the reparations rally coming up in May. So one of the first things I was really interested in, especially considering Malcolm X discussions around the importance of having socioeconomic control of your conditions, he argued with reparations that were owed to African Americans, but also the African diaspora for the unpaid labor of our ancestors. How does this demand connect to the broader struggle against economic warfare that has historically targeted African cultures and communities?
Well, the key thing is knowing history, because to make a claim on reparations, despite us saying, oh, we were in slavery in America and these people and this government sanctioned that enslavement, you still have to prove it in a court.
Right.
And that means you must have facts. And that facts must come from the historical experiences, its recording, its documentation, to be presented. And people have been trying since the 1800s to carry out, and some persons, individuals, actually have won reparations, and I can't recall the names right now, for themselves. Back in the 1800s. And the fight for reparations in the 20th century and into the 21st century have been a major fights from the days of Marcus Garvey. And one of the leaders of that fight have been Queen Mother Moore, who was with Garvey and who continued the fight for reparations, actually leading the fight for reparations and helping to establish the organization in Cobra. That was one of the leading forces for reparations in this country for decades. There have been other forces, multiple groups around the country that have fought for reparations in the country. It's something that multiple people through time since the First World War have gotten. You know, Poland was able to get reparations. That's where the term came into play after the First World War. Germany, certain aspects of Germany was given reparations after the First World War. After the Second World War, the Jews who have built what is called Israel was given reparations by multiple countries, not only Germany, but others, including America. The Native Americans, well, the Asiatic Native Americans have gotten reparations, multiple different tribal groups. The Japanese for their internment during the Second World War. So many people, and that's just those who are acquainted with the United States, have gotten reparations. And reparations is really a payment for a crime, and mostly the crime of genocide against the people. And certainly the 230-something years of in-chain genocide called chattel slavery, and then the 100 or so years of Jim Crow illegal enslavement more than warrants genocide, recognition and reparations granting for the African American people.
Right. Right.
And it's going to happen. It may not happen in this lifetime. We didn't get in this situation in a year or 2 years or 10 years or 100 years. This is a process that has been close to 500 years plus. And you're not going to undo it in a generation. We haven't even figured out what the process is. We've just been fighting for the process to come into being. Yeah. And maybe the different reparations groups around the country and then the world need to stop competing with I'm the one, I'm going to get it, because not a damn one of them are going to get it as the one. and try to find some united bases under which to work. We know that CARICOM in the Caribbean has their own reparations process going, and even some other islands separate from the CARICOM group have their own reparations process going. Multiple African nations are beginning to mount their reparations demands against those people who colonized and enslaved them in their own countries. And then we have multiple groups here in America. There's no denying that we deserve reparations. It's just being able to hold the people legally accountable in the international legal arena or in their own legal arena, which I don't think we're going to have much success at, in order to get reparations, because it was the very courts of the United States that supported slavery and made the laws and the rules, upheld the laws and the rules that kept slavery in place. It's going to be hard to get them to make that move. But maybe the international courts in Geneva and other places emanating out of the UN, we will have a greater success. But it has to first start with us putting a case together, like you put any legal case together, getting the evidence, what bank did what corporation did what oligarch group did what so-called royal family did what. Where is this evidence? And it's all over the place, the evidence, and compile that and bring it before the world. Show the genocide, the millions and millions of our people worked to death, literally within 3 or 4 years of setting foot on this continent, and then just got replenished by enslaving more to work to death in 3 or 4 years for hundreds of years. And so we know what the crime is, but we need to accentuate it in the eyes of the world, because some people talk about slavery like it was a work program that we agreed upon. Somebody just went bad on the contract end of it. And we kind of call it what it was. It was genocide, the worst genocide known to mankind. Millions upon millions of people slaughtered, women and children, before they even got on ships in our homeland. Millions lost on this side, mostly by white diseases, but enough by being worked to death in the arms of the Europeans. So all of those things have to come together to make a case. And a lot of people are doing a good job. I just think there need to be greater unity on the part of all of the different groups that say they're working on the reparations process. If we're going to see, real success over time.
Indeed. Beautiful. Yes, that's a beautiful opening. Thank you, sister, for, just really honing down on where Malcolm X would certainly, advocate an issue that he would certainly advocate on. And, Baba Smalls, you've been, honoring the work of Brother Malcolm for 60 years with taking groups and bringing people together, sharing his legacy and really keeping the name out there. But just for those who may not know your role, for instance, and I know I've heard it dozens of times on the call, well, not dozens, but more than a few times on the Carl Nelson show in Baltimore and the DC area. Shout out to Carl Nelson for continuing to enlighten most of us here in the Baltimore, DC area. But you came on board and you were the first imam for Muslim Mosque Incorporated and the organization for African American Unity. Can you just, for those who may not.
Let me just, because most people just know Professor Small. They don't really know what it is that caused me to be. But I met Malcolm back in '63, so neither of you were born yet. It was a short meeting, but it was an impacting meeting. That next year in '64, I went in the military. And in '65, while I was in France, actually trying to go to the meeting that my brother made me aware of, that Malcolm would be coming to speak, but he never showed up. And me and about 4 other guys. We didn't know why. We were 18, 19-year-old young people. And so when he didn't show, we went back to Cairns, where we were stationed at the time, and had fun, party, got some boats, some wine, did our thing. But a month out to sea, a little bit more than a month out to sea, I think I got mail call. And I was at the time, of course, in the U.S. Navy. And I had a big packet from my brother. And in that packet was the news clippings of Malcolm's assassination.
Mm.
And I immediately compiled those clippings into a portfolio, into a big photo album. And I was given a rude awakening. Even I was very politically active in the military, and we had our own political organization, shipboard, and in our flotilla. I wasn't at 19 as conscious as one would think. When they think of me now at 19, I was just a kid, really, learning how to move to be an adult. And I showed these photographs because my brother also sent me all of his clippings of the Kennedy assassination the year before I went in the military. And the Central Intelligence Division seized that material from me on shipboard. That's a Navy, sort of a CIA arm in the Navy, similar. All the military have their own intelligence element. And I was with the Central Intelligence Division. And of course, then they denied that they took it. But I realized then there was more to the young man who spoke so forcefully, who I'd met in '63, than one would think, because why would they seize all of that, those clippings from me, and then deny seizing it, even though people saw them go into my locker and take it? I knew there was more happening politically, because all of a sudden I started getting written up for almost anything I did wrong, and I'm trying to figure what's going on, thinking I'm just being a bad dude or something, and realizing that I'm called before the XOs for captain's mast for trivia. And then I realized some of the older brothers pulled my coat and says, they're out to get you. And so they wanted me to shut my mouth, silence me. So after one of the captain's masts, I was made the librarian. Now somebody said, oh, wow, you were the librarian in the Navy. That's wonderful. Not if you got to sit in a room by yourself all day with nobody to talk to. It's who comes to the library. And a few brothers would come in the morning before going to work duty, 7:30 or so. 8 o'clock, they're gone. A couple of people may show up at lunchtime between 12 and 1. And then a couple of people would show up. I'd be there until 6 to 7. And some people would show up again maybe at 6 o'clock. So the rest of the day, I'm by myself, locked in a room with books. Of course, that turned out not to be a great disadvantage once someone knows what to do with the book. But that was a punishment to remove me from ship's company and to lessen my influence in organizing and talking, doing what I do now. That people think I just started. No, I was doing this then. I was talking about anything I could talk about Black people. And so when I left the Navy, I left the Navy in '66, November. I immediately went directly to Malcolm X OAAU. I met his sister Ella, her chief bodyguard, a brother who taught me a lot, named Willie Starks, who was with Malcolm up until the day he passed. And within 2 months, I was Ella's personal bodyguard, a position I would hold for the next 18 years. But at the same time, about 6 months later, I was during that early period, the first 3 months, I was just recruiting young brothers from Vietnam, just back home, because they knew how to use weapons. They were military men. And then I realized they had no grounding, they had no spiritual grounding, no foundation. They were just out in the world. So I request the reopening of the Muslim Mosque Inc., which had closed at the death of Malcolm. And it was the new mosque that he founded. And so they went on actually a worldwide search for an imam. And the committee had people from the Sudan, from Saudi Arabia, from the United States, from across the Sunni Black leadership, which was very small at that time. And they chose me. And I refused because I didn't even put my name in. I didn't know who put my name in. I'd studied Islam and I could speak a little Arabic at the time, but my interest was simply to know history. You know, I was interested in religion. And I wanted to have some place where the young men could learn what I was learning, how to make prayers, how to do those things, how to be disciplined. And I refused after Haji Sham, that's the brother who performed Malcolm's janazah, brother Barry Malcolm, came in and informed me that I had been chosen as the imam. And I told him that no, I wasn't about religion. That wasn't my thing. I grew up in a Baptist church. That was enough. I wanted to be free. And so for another week, they re-interviewed some people, interviewed others, and I was chosen again. So this time, Hisham asked me to walk around the block with him. Whenever one of your elders say, "Come, go walk around the block," don't do it. Right? Said, no, brother. The answer is no. But I walked around the block. Hisham convinced me to do it for 1 year, and I stayed in the position for 11 years. Right? So, and it was a good thing. I learned how to be an Islamic clergy. I went to Mecca on the Hajj. I was ordained in Mecca to teach Islam in the West. Very few people hold that title in the world, but I was given that title. I'm Al-Hajj Amin Shahid, a name I no longer use. Of course, Hajj is a title. I could use it with any name. I chose not to do that either. I realized that in that experience at Mecca and back and forth into the Arab world, that there was an African world, and all of the other worlds did not treat or look kindly upon the African world. And I belong to that African world. I walked away from Islam as a result of that, resigned as the imam over the mosque, and moved away into other parts of the struggle, remaining in the OAAU. And contrary to what a lot of people would like to think, I am still the international vice president of the OAAU. We're not celebrities. We're not on a stage. We are not, how do you say? We're not looking to be in anybody's popularity contest or taken out by any intelligence organization in the world. We've existed this long in the form that we exist. Malcolm's nephew, Rodnell, is our president, our international president. We do work, and we do not have to spread the name OAAU to get our work done. And we also have multiple, how do you say, subsidiary organizations, if you want to put it that way, that we work out of. One of the main ones that's a little better known is called the Sons of Africa. Yes. Footing here in North America, but we have them in multiple places in the Caribbean and on the continent. And all we want to do is help our people, wherever we are at, whether we have one person in that country or 100 in that country. Our objective is to try to stick to the principles of Malcolm X, which was Pan-Africanism and African nationalism. They call Black nationalism. They're not opposing things at all. Nationalism is dealing in your local environment, trying to control economic, politics, and culture for your group interests. Pan-Africanism is the unification of African people around the world around a common interest concerning economic, politics, and culture. And so we try to make sure we support those leaders in Africa who stand for those things. Very few have, but for the few who have, we've stood by them, even to their death. You know, I had a chance to sit with Sankara, who's very close with President Rowland, and a few others. So here in the U.S., married for 53 years to a very nice sister I met when we were in college. We have 6 kids. We have together birthed 4, and I had 2 children before I got married, and we raised those children. They're all adults now with their children. I've tried to work in any and every political formation in this country, especially in this city. Fighting on any issue that I thought was relevant, I would work with Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, Dr. Jeffries, all of the great scholars. I worked with them. but I also worked very closely in the beginning with Al Sharpton before I felt he went astray. Certainly still work until this day with the December 12th movement on any project they're doing, especially supporting Zimbabwe and other African countries. And any formation that goes to the streets. I don't march anymore because my knees are bad, but I spend a lot of time in the streets in many different places in the country. Chicago and Detroit and LA, in the Carolinas, wherever people were fighting, we would send our people to fight with them. And many times, since I was also, besides the international vice president, I was Eastern regional coordinator, I would be on set, or even assist in finding different Black educational and political organizations that we thought would help in the struggle for self-determination. So basically, that's who I am. I've been lecturing and trying to teach our history for 60 plus years. And people say, why are you going to write a book? Well, I got 2,000 tapes. Go listen to some. Everywhere. Every mode of recording ever used, starting with reel to reel, I've done it. Okay. Till today. So don't listen to one tape. So I heard Brother Small. Listen to the teachings. I have gone to great length to give good teaching. When I'm doing even when I'm doing the podcast with any brothers, I put in, my wife can tell you, I put in hours and hours of study. I don't get in front of this computer and start yada, yada, yada. It may sound like it's all flowing out of my brain, but I've been in a lot of books. If I just showed you around this room, there's a lot of books up in there. And I spend a lot of time in them preparing myself to give people information that's useful, especially the young people. At 80 years old in a few months, I don't know how much time I'm going to have down on the planet Earth. This belongs to you guys. The struggle belongs to you. The future belongs to you. You're the architects. You've got to design it. And then you've got to implement it. But learn from us. Learn from our mistakes and learn from the things we've been successful about. You know, me and the Clark and the Malcolm and the King and the others. I got to meet Dr. King. I was a comrade with Jamal, the brother we call Rap Brown, who we're trying to get out of prison even to this day. Comrade, of course, with all of the members, key members of the Black Panther Party, from Deruba Ben Wahad to Tula Shakur to Asada Shakur to Zaid Shakur. These are all my comrades. We were all young people together, fighting in the streets together, trying to bring change in the ways we thought then was the best way forward. And whatever mistakes we made, we didn't make them because we wanted to make mistakes. We made them because we tried with the tools that we had. And Malcolm has always said in his speeches, by any means necessary. And so we would do that. We lost a lot of brothers and sisters, a lot of them killed, a lot went to prison, you know, a lot of families destroyed. People don't think about that. We were all very young, in our late teens or early 20s. And most of the Black Liberation Army members, a few who's still in prison that were trying to get out, and the ones who got out had been in there 35, 40 years. But they went in there at 18, 19 years old, 20 years old. Okay. And they weren't out there doing foolishness. They weren't selling drugs. They weren't killing our people in the streets. They were politically advocating for the freedom of the Black race worldwide, supporting the liberation movements all over Africa and in the Caribbean, Central America, South America, wherever we could. And for those acts, many died, many names you don't know. Many lives were destroyed by the authorities of this nation. And we had some great victories too. Victories we'll never get credit for, because when a force sees a force coming after them, they usually give in to the lesser force, you know, and that's cool. So we put enough pressure to bring a lot of rules and laws and administrative changes and education and other things into being into this country. I can recall at least 4 student campus takeovers that I was involved in. And I only went to one of the schools, but our job was wherever our people we were fighting.
Right.
You did what you could.
Well, let me take a second here and, you know, just mention for those and Sister Nkozia, you actually met up with Baba Smalls in Ghana, and I want to share a clip that he has that Sister Felicia sent for the Accra, Ghana, and Egypt tour. So that's going to be 2 weeks, and I got the flyer. Many may not see it in the upper right-hand corner, but I'm going to play the video right now here. Let me share my screen, and okay, no, that's the wrong. Let me make sure I get the right one up here. Okay, let me just start it and then, okay, wait a minute. No, I need to share. I need to share the video. Actually, let me.
Yeah, take your time.
Here we go. All right.
Family, this is Professor James Small, and I'm inviting you to join me on a life-changing journey to Ghana with Happy from July 25th to August 5th, 2025. This is more than a trip. It's a very spiritual homecoming. We will stand in the very waters where our ancestors took their last bath before being taken from their homeland, never to return. We will honor them, reconnect with our roots, and experience the beauty of Ghana, its people, its culture, and its spirit. And most importantly, we will do this together, surrounded by like-minded brothers and sisters on this journey of remembrance and healing. The ancestors are calling. Will you answer? Visit akedtours.com and return home.
All right. Okay, let me close that out here. Okay. I think that's
Well,
done.
Sister Nkozia, you were
Yes.
on the trip, and I know you. When we all go sometimes to West Africa for the first time, and we're eating different foods, and you had just come from Egypt where you were eating one type of food, and then you came into another dietary situation, and that can sometimes upset your stomach, which happened to you, happened to me multiple times. And I know you didn't get to go to all of the spots we went to, but you got to see enough of it that you have a sense of what we try to do with this tour as an educational tour. We visit up to 4 museums on this tour, and trying to just give a sense of what our history looks like, feel like, and at the same time move through a country and watch a country as it's giving birth to itself. Ghana is a developing institution, and most of its population are young people. So you want to speak to us, and that you've spent multiple times in Ghana, not just on our trip, but you've been back and forth on your own. So you would like to talk to us a little bit about Ghana, then we can get back to Malcolm, because he also spent time in Ghana.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. It was a great tour. Like, I loved us going to the medical research center, the organic shop, where we got to see all the different medicines.
That was all
different plants.
Messed up from the poison ivy, and I went there. They took care of me too, and they healed everything. Right, the medicine worked.
Yeah, that was terrible. Yeah, here that poison ivy, that was really scary, but yeah. But no, it was a beautiful trip. Yeah, I think I missed a few things, but the museum that we had went to, that I still want to ping in with, that museum that we had reached out to, and allow for the African diasporans to know about a history like that. And maybe we could have the few institutions that we do have a lot of people at, like Howard University, partner with that museum. Do you remember the name of the museum? They had so much history there, and he had used all his funds to collect that history, and had ties with Malcolm X as well, and that was really beautiful. And I want to continue to go back there.
It's the one in Esokado in the Western region,
right?
And the founder of the museum also has an African-owned completely television station called the Pan African TV in Ghana, and he used his own money to build that museum. And it covers the Caribbean, the United States, and Africa. He built a real Pan-African museum. This is in the Western region. And what's beautiful about the Western region, where that museum is located, when we went to Nana and Ketsy's house where the naming ceremony was,
Right.
the house up on the hill to the right, I didn't get a chance, I don't know, but I pointed out to you guys, that's where Malcolm X stayed, that's where Maya Angelou stayed. That was the family that Maya Angelou lived with while she was in Ghana. And so that is the family whose king oversees our naming ceremony. And the man who built that museum is actually his best friend and brother comrade.
Right. He talked about that briefly. He was still choked up about what he had witnessed with Malcolm X as well. So
yes, he really was.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, we also have.
He stayed in Harlem for some time, and he attributes, because of his activism, he had to escape from America and go back to Ghana, never to return to America again.
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, well, we also have Sister Felicia is on here.
Hi, Felicia.
Peace to everybody.
Peace and blessings. Good to hear you. I'm glad you're stationary, right? You got your good earphones on.
I know I couldn't find my little ones, so I'm like, I feel like I'm like a DJ or something.
Right. That's why I'm like, what's those what's those Dr. Dre things or whatever?
Well, Felicia, did you meet Sister Nkozia?
No, how you doing, Sister Nkozia?
Who just returned from Ghana a few weeks ago.
Oh, that's what I heard you. Yeah, I heard you talking, and I was getting excited. I can't wait to go. Like I literally cannot wait to go.
It's gonna be a great trip.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Felicia, if you want to go ahead and whatever you want to say, if you wanted to talk about the trip a little bit, any more details, if you want to add on.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, listen. I know Professor Small. He lays it down with all the historical information. I'm more like logistics, and I'm here to tell the family that if you were thinking about doing it, and he's like, "Oh, I don't know what." Listen, come right now, because a couple of things. One, this is the first time I'm ever traveling with Professor Small, and that right there is worth it to me. I've traveled with Dr. Jeffries and Fudishi, but first time I get to travel with Professor. And I've never been to Ghana. I've been to Egypt a bunch of times. I'm so looking forward to this Ghana trip. So it's like the best of both worlds to me right now. And family, I thank you so much for showing.
This was a good job.
Having our little our flyer video.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and right here, iCat Tours. If you guys have any questions, you can go to Professor's page. He has a call button. You just call me. Listen, we're here for the family, and so you can make it work. We have lots of payment plans. We're gonna get you to Ghana and Egypt. So just give us a call. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you very much, sister. And I met you several times, so always, and thank you for having me on 2 years ago.
Yeah, you got to come back, Haki.
Yeah, thank you.
Like, people come. Yeah, people come one time and then be like, okay, where they at?
Oh.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate it. But it was good, going to Detroit and, having that flavor. Detroit, anytime I get to go there, that's always a blessing. So thank you for all the work that you and Brother Taki are doing to enlighten us in the re-Africanization process. And that's what we must do, re-Africanization and nation building.
Yeah. We literally fought. We are doing what our elders tell us to do. I ain't mentioned nobody's name. I'm just saying it might be somebody on this phone, on this little call right now, that be telling us what to do. We just do what they say. That's it. And and listen, you got to come back to Happy Talks and talk about the Malcolm X. In this huge entourage we getting to come up this year. The first time I went was last year, and I was like, why did it take me this long to get here? And I live in New York City.
Wow.
And Rosie's gonna come this year. She's gonna get on that bus and come from DC or get on that train.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We've been doing it for 60
It was
years.
so nice.
60 years. And
And
I've been a part of the leadership of it and the critical leadership for the last 59 years.
okay, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
And it's
But,
important because it's a pilgrimage. And it was instituted by his sister Ella the year he
mm,
as
okay.
a pilgrimage. And at first we were opposed. Many Muslim brothers were saying, oh, y'all worshiping a man. Nah,
Mm,
you don't understand Islam. I studied
mm,
the Hadith very well. And
mm,
one of the things that all Muslims are implored to do is to visit the grave site of their martyrs. You're
mm.
asked to do it, you know?
Wow.
But those who did not know and truly read and understood history, we don't have that issue now. Many Muslims come from multiple different places.
Mm,
And the Mosque of the Islamic Brotherhood, which was founded by one of Malcolm's Islamic students, Imam Tawfiq, and was headed by another one of his students today, Imam Rashid. They come and do the Islamic part of the ceremony. It's not the Muslim Mosque's pilgrimage. It is the OAAU pilgrimage.
mm,
Everyone else is our guest. And so
mm,
we also have Akan priesthood come for libation. We have Yoruba priesthood come. Sometimes we have Native Americans come. And
mm,
we certainly try to involve the children in almost every year in some
mm,
form or fashion. And we've been blessed that every year people bring busloads of children.
wow.
And the
Wow.
idea is it was to create an anchor place spiritually and culturally for African American people. This was a young man who at age 39 took 19 bullets on
Mm,
our behalf.
mm,
19 bullets,
mhm,
right? 39 years old, one of the most brilliant minds ever produced in North America.
mm,
But he could have run away the night before. He could have gone into hiding. He knew somebody was trying to kill him. He knew the possibility of them getting away with it was very real.
mm,
And he knew there was a greater possibility of him being killed than it was his escaping. You know, he had a wife and how many children? 3 children at the time, and she was carrying 2 children in her stomach. And so when we think of Malcolm, think beyond just the man standing up there making very strong speeches, but think of this young brother, 30-something years old. All of my children are older than him, right? And to think of that beautiful family he had. And I got to know Sister Betty very well and move around with her and lectured with her. An extraordinary queen, extraordinary. People don't know enough about her, you know. But Malcolm X wasn't just a political figure. He is at the level of what other cultures call a prophet.
mm,
He's at the level of what other cultures make national heroes out of, because
mhm,
of the way he analyzed our situation. And then came up with a method for solving it. Remember, he was in the Nation of Islam. That was founded by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the teaching methodology that he used and improvised on was started by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But no one improvised on it like Malcolm did. When he came, they had a couple of thousand people. When he died, they had hundreds of thousands of people, almost all of whom he recruited. When he came, they had less than a dozen mosques. When he died, they had more than 100 mosques. You know? And these young men were mostly out of the penitentiary system. He pulled off the streets who were alcoholics and crime, on drugs. And he came up with a method to use the mind and the knowledge of self and the knowledge of our ancestors to clean these people up and make them some of the most powerful men in America, black or white. And so we need to give them credit for that ability to help enhance that teaching methodology of the Nation of Islam so that it produced the product it produced in black men and women. Because when you see the women of the Nation of Islam, you see some of the most powerful black women in America. And you may meet thousands of black women who have left the nation, but almost all of them are in some leadership, some professional, or some business motif. in the country, which tells you something about the teachings of the Nation of Islam, and especially those who came under the teachings of Malcolm X, of Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, Omar Wali. So we don't want to forget that part of his name. That was the last name he chose. So when we think of his 100th birthday, we have to think of Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Martin Delaney, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, people who gave their life for Black Americans, African Americans. And then we got people who are now confused and say, we ain't from Africa. So I got to sit some more of them down. And that's just the old self-hate. People just, every generation has found a way to manifest their self-hate based on ignorance, or to, they've come up now attacking the term Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism, Malcolm was a Pan-Africanist. Pan-Africanism is not an organization. It's not an ideology. It's just the concept of people uniting. Pan simply means unity. Other groups have used that word pan when they're trying to unite themselves. There's no group that is a Pan-Africanist group. People may say, I'm in a group and the group believe in Pan-Africanism. But Pan-Africanism don't have an ideology besides we must unite. You can be a Muslim, you can be a Christian, you could be a Hebrew Israelite, you could be a Moor. You can still come together as a Pan-Africanist. You can be in the Caribbean, you can be in the United States, the UK, or on the continent. Pan-Africanism means we can all unite from where we at around the common interests of our people, around a common political interest, a common economic interest, which we all will establish. But when people have been made afraid to fight people, that's what it comes down to. Right now, we have a government that's run by the bottom of the cracker barrel. The poorest whites in this country have finally got power. They have never had power before. You had the oligarch had the power. The wealthy whites had the power. Now you have the poorest of the poor have the power. And they're the most misinformed people on the planet Earth. About race issues, about their own history, and about us. And so, go ahead and go.
Well, I just had one statement. Today, I've been trying to wrap my brain around Elon Musk selling Twitter X to his AI company and getting $33 billion, and his history of the apartheid, his family history of the apartheid, racism, colonialism, and eugenics. But I did have a question in light of Malcolm X's advocacy for Black land, for Black liberation. How can preserving African cultural practices in the United States serve as a foundation for economic empowerment? You spoke a little bit about it, but I wanted to hear more of an expansive view, because it seems like there's becoming a solidification of brainwashing in this new generation. And then my other question was, you spoke a little bit about Miss Collins, Ella Collins, and I was wondering what lessons from their leadership, Ella Collins and Malcolm X, resonate most strongly in today's fight for social justice.
Somebody asked Malcolm one day, they said, Brother Minister Malcolm, what do you mean by Black nationalism? Do you remember his answer?
No, please repeat it.
Yes. When asked, what do you mean by Black nationalism? Malcolm X said, you must control the economics, the politics, and the culture where you live. Now, he used the word social in place of culture, but culture is the best description. And so when we think of Malcolm, most people just think of his strong rhetoric against racism, but they don't think of the fact that his ideology was about building the economic, political, and social foundation of the Black community.
Right.
That was the goal. That was his stated goal. And the one thing he did in the Nation of Islam was the largest Black business corporation in America under the leadership of Malcolm X. After the death of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, his son Wallace dismantled the business, but had no concept of how culture and business should work together. if you go into any of our community, you see multi-ethnic groups, not African Americans, running the retail and wholesale infrastructure of our community. Malcolm X was saying that's inappropriate, that you must control the retail and the wholesale infrastructure in your community. Black nationalism means you must control not only the economic, politics, culture, but the land, labor, and resources of your community. And it seems like so many people don't understand that. They think if you say, I want to be a businessman, that you're anti-Black. And on the other hand, that those who think that if I want to be a businessman, I can't be an African. It's the strangest thing, but I understand why. The system has screwed up our minds that way, you know, because everybody has to eat. Everybody has to have shelter. Everybody has to have clothing. And you can't get that unless you have an economic foundation that allows you to do that for you and your family. You know, and so then we come up with the methodology of how do we do this? You know, how do we begin to, this is where culture come in Nkozia, because culture fosters the unity of a people to operate around the group's interests. Because you can't do this as a bunch of individuals with skill.
Right.
You know, because right now I was searching last week, looking for the wealthiest Black communities in America, of which we have many. And I'm talking about community with 60% or more Black people whose income is 100,000 or more. And you're all down in the Baltimore and Prince George's area, you got 2 or 3 of those types of communities right there. And coming up in Northern Maryland, you have more. You have them in North Carolina. You have 2 or 3 in LA. You've got them here in New York. You got them out here on Long Island. You've got them up in Boston. We're talking about probably hundreds of some of the wealthiest communities in America is Black, but they don't operate like that. They operate as individuals living in a nice gated community, sending their children off to the best colleges, driving the finest car, and doing minimal things. You know, they do charitable things, many of these communities, and the sororities and fraternities that many of them belong to. But we're not a couple of 100,000 people. We're nearly 60 million people, all right? And if your efforts can't reach out to try to help the bulk of that 60 million, your effort is almost useless. It means your effort is working for the other side, those who are opposed to our survival and our thriving.
Exactly.
Because those communities can thrive. They can help share that body of knowledge of how to develop entrepreneurship, how to move, you know, in a larger grouping into higher education to get tools and skills, but having that consciousness to bring it back home, not move away to a separate, isolated suburb, okay? And if you go to the suburb, then build the Black foundation there. Don't go as an individual hiding in the midst of other ethnic groups. Take care of their group. But you're a part of their group, taking care of their group. You're not part of your group, taking care of your group. I hope you understand that.
I do.
Because we miss that. And then you have to say, well, you know, people have struggled for so long, and there's been such terrorism in this country, economic terrorism, physical terrorism, burning our bodies, barbecuing our bodies, lynching us, chopping us up, all the things they've done to us, raping our women over and over. Even in the era when the chains was off of our hands, the social terrorism, just for our women still working on these plantations. I grew up on a plantation, so I know what I'm talking about. They were abused by the white elite on those plantations. Right up to now, because we still have people in Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, and other places working on these plantations. We still have people sharecropping in America, even though they don't call it sharecropping anymore, which was nothing but an extension of chattel slavery without the chains. And then when we talk about the prison system, starting with Angola, which should be closed and everybody set free,
Yeah.
you know? And then we're talking about a prison system across the country with nothing but an extension of chattel slavery, and it still is. So we have challenges that we have to elevate visually so people can see. You know, the reason you don't let people get a good education is you want to deprive them from making a living honestly, forcing them to have to do things that that the society is determined to be criminal behavior, so you can put them back into incarceration and make them slaves again. Every prison in America works with the people in there works for different corporations. Every Nabisco cookie you eat, people in prisons make those cookies.
Right.
For 3 cents, 5 cents on the dollar.
Mm.
And many of the license, cookies. Many of the corporations use prison labor. Under the guise we helping them get a little bit of money, to buy the toiletries and the shit that they're doing, or we helping them buy the clothing. But they use prison labor. Many of these corporations do. And the state's government use them for all sorts of things. So not just making license plates or making the furniture we see in state and city offices and stuff. Much of that stuff is made in prison.
Mm.
This is slave labor.
So what do you think is the way to get the next generation, the new generations coming up, to care more about these things in the age of technology where it is able to capture people's minds? It's easier for people's minds.
Teach the history and the culture. That is the key. It sounds so mundane. It sounds so easy that people go, oh man, teach the history and the culture. Teach people to love themselves by learning to love their ancestors, learning to love their mothers and their fathers. Despite the crippling ailment many of our parents have had and have been injured. My father left my mother when I was like 3 years old. Never seen him since. I just remember walking around that bed crying. Okay? But my mother then married a man with 11 children she had, and my stepfather was a god. He raised 11 of us plus one of his own. Wow. He died too young, but he was the most beautiful human being I've ever known, and he gave me a lot of the strength that I have. So we know that there's good African men, and my daddy was one of them. There's good African women, and so it was my father and my mother that kept me in my history and my culture. My grandmother was a root lady who kept me in my history and my culture. That's why I know history and culture is what works. That is what takes you and informs you of how to be whatever it is you're going to be. You're going to be a lawyer? Fine. You could be a lawyer for the Zionists. You could be a lawyer for the Anglo-Saxons, or you can be a lawyer for the Black folk. Now, which lawyer are you going to be? Right. And so that's where history and culture comes in. It tells you, it comes up like, who loved you, baby? And that's your ancestors. They gave so much, hoping that your generation, Nkosi, which is one of the greatest we've ever produced, y'all are the most highly technical group that we've ever produced. You're the most educated group, meaning having access to educational training and skills and tools. You're the most courageous, moving all over the world and doing all kinds of things. But you need the bond. The glue is culture.
Right.
And there's no singular cultural presentation. We have multiple cultural presentations, but there's an underlying spiritual foundation to all African culture. And studying history lets you learn that. But we're confused. We think spirituality is like religion, and you approach it like you approach Western religion. No. Spirituality is our ancestors' interpretation of their understanding of science, right? Their interpretation of their understanding of cosmology, their interpretation of their understanding of ecology and the environment we find ourselves in, how we work with it and how it works with us. That's what spirituality is on the real with African people. That's why I rather call it African sacred science rather than spirituality. And that is the ship in which the educational system that you call culture. Culture is the people's educational system because it gives you your values, your interests, and your principles. And so the key is study history, because history gives you the information to see what I just said. And Malcolm saw that very early on, because Malcolm, a lot of people try to play Malcolm like, oh, he was so downtrodden as a child. Well, listen, when Ella went and got, first of all, his mama, one of the greatest women, Sister Louisa, was in the Marcus Garvey organization. She was an officer in the UNIA, not just a member. She was the secretary of one of their chapters. She was one of the editors of one of their newsletters. So that meant she had She was very politically active and conscious, and the father was the head of a UNIA chapter and a minister. So they even at the beginnings, they came out of an intense African-centered environment. Now,
Wow.
after Mama's taken away, yes, they put him into the social service system for a couple of years, but Ella came and got him.
Right.
And most people don't know Miss Ella Collins. You know, Miss Ella Collins became my mother. I lived in her house for 18 years. I drove everywhere she went. I ran all the bank accounts and everything else. I was the other son. Because when I first went to Ella's house, I slept in Malcolm's room. I wore Malcolm's pajamas. I read the books that Malcolm left all of the notes and all of that stuff. Until one day I just went upstairs with Sister Stella. I don't want to be Malcolm X. I want to be James Small. I don't know if I'll learn about Malcolm, but I don't want to be Malcolm. So he used to fix me Malcolm's favorite breakfast, Malcolm's favorite desserts. And we were good friends and like mother and son. So, and there was one other brother who you don't know, Rodnell Perkins Collins. That's her son. You know, but there was two other ladies in the family. One graduated from Spelman, Aunt Gracie, Aunt Sarah, I'm sorry, and then Aunt Gracie. And those three women, along with Ella's husband, helped groom the man you know as Malcolm X, not the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam gave him a place to manifest that. But he came from this foundation where his great-grandfather had been murdered for killing the white folks who raped and lynched his wife. He came from the struggle and this knowledge of self.
Wow.
You know? And from a family that was conscious. Ella was one of the wealthier Black people in Boston. You know, she was no joke.
Yes. Well, let me hop in there. You know, just some key points. And first, and just to add, Brother Dr. Kafani and Sister Nkozia, I went to Jersey where Professor Smalls. I'm not sure if you spoke earlier in the day, Baba, but there was the.
No, I was just visiting for once.
Okay.
I was happy just to come and learn.
Yeah, right. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was the 7th year for the African Spirituality Conference at Essex College, and I actually went there. You know, the past couple of years I've gone, but when I went back, it was I recall I was like, I came here for an ASCAC conference like maybe 10 years ago. It's been it's been a while since I went there, but I recall. So they've been going strong, and he's always, my understanding, he comes to the Malcolm X and bring a group or something.
Yeah, he brings 2 buses every year, Dr. Kafani.
Right. But I've had people reach out from the Virgin Islands, and somebody reached out from the UK just today. So I'm, really confident, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Elder Babatunde, who is from Baltimore, who actually has done this tour to come up and, for some years.
Many years. Okay.
Close to 20, if I'm not mistaken, maybe more. But I did come once or twice, I recall. So,
So the key when we think of a Malcolm, think of the political environment that he was trying to organize in.
Right.
And even though they center him a lot just in the New York vicinity, he was all over the country, including the South, building temples in Atlanta, in Mississippi, in Alabama. But they really talk about his work in the South. He was in the West Coast, in Los Angeles, he's in Washington State, he's in Michigan, he's in Chicago, building different organizations and bringing brothers and sisters together. Even in New York, most people don't know that he opened a major temple in Brooklyn, bought nearly a whole block over there. And those facilities are still there, being run by the mosque, the Sunni mosque that Wallace converted the nation's mosque to today. He was a good organizer and a good teacher. He could persuade you were walking in the desert when you were swimming in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. He was that good, right? And so he understood that it all had to do with economic, politics, and culture, because everywhere he built a temple, he built a business. It was either a bakery business or they did strategic thing, hardware businesses, clothing businesses, shoe repair businesses, barbershops. Those, wherever there was a temple, those type of businesses came up around them. So they never separated their spiritual development from their economic development. I think one of the weaknesses were they did not get involved in local politics. And I think there should have been a greater involvement in electoral politics. We live in America. The reality is, if you don't elect that person to office to represent you, your enemies will. Okay? And if you want to make sure the person, whether blackface or not, is representing you in your capital city or in your city council or in the national government, then you've got to be involved in the politics at that level. Now, Malcolm did see that, and he did work with that level, but that was not the aim of the organization, which was part of the problem between him and much of the leadership in Chicago. They wanted to be a theocracy, and Malcolm wanted it to be more of a political, social advocacy. And those two things conflicted. But some people saying, listen, we're a church, we're temples. We're doing a religious thing, not that political stuff. That political thing will bring heat on us. So Malcolm wanted to do the political thing as well as the spiritual thing. And that's where the conflict came between him and the leadership in the nation, not the things they said he said about the messenger. That happened a week before he died. What he got pushed out had nothing to do with that. It had to do with his becoming too political for those who thought that they were trying to build a religious movement. And they felt was taking the religious movement into a religious political movement. And that caused great conflict.
And just a point of clarity in terms of that sort of separation. I know that Malcolm, as he's teaching the fruit of Islam, and I believe if it was a brother in LA, he got killed. And Malcolm went to LA, and he was like ready to do something, and he got told to
stand down.
Yes, right. That's the word, stand down. And my understanding that Malcolm was just like, we can't do this. You cannot like let somebody walk all over you and not do something, right? So.
Well, he did obey the messenger of Islam, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He did obey the orders to stand down. Right. But what he did, he came back to New York and he went into his basement with two brothers who, I forgot the brother's name. I met them when I first came out of the war and got to know them very well. But they wrote a book called Two Black Writers' Response to Styron's Nat Turner. Someone had made this, white boy had made this massive negative critique of Nat Turner, and these two brothers responded to him. Right. So those two brothers got with Malcolm on a weekend in Malcolm's basement in Queens, and they created Muhammad Speaks newspapers. And the newspaper was his response. Okay. And so that's when the newspaper was founded in his basement, and that was his response to fighting back for the brother who was killed in LA by putting the information all over the world. He was a man who simply loved his people. He was a man who studied history. He knew history. Some people say, oh, he learned the whole dictionary. Yes, he did that too. And that gave him a vocabulary like no one in the world, and an understanding of the words that he was using and how to use language. But he also studied and read history. I remember one of the books when I first moved to Boston that was in his room, beside his bed, that he had been reading the week before, was by a guy named Camus. It was a priest in France who fought against Nazism. and it's called Resistance, Rebellion, and Death.
Mm.
And to learn, and so when I think of Camus as being a Catholic priest and Malcolm as being a Muslim clergy, and resisting the same kind of tyranny that Camus was faced with at the beginning of the Nazi episode in Europe, the book made sense why he read that particular book on resistance, rebellion, and death.
Mm.
And so I read the book. Malcolm was reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't even know what my relationship to that family is or was. I mean, I was on the phone with Roddy today for the work we want to do this 19th in Boston, at the park that is now dedicated to Malcolm, at the mosque that we had dedicated to Malcolm, at the house that we've been made a national landmark. Somebody has to run all of these things. So OAU run these things quiet. There's a park in DC that we were working on before Trump got in, and it was going to be named the Malcolm X Park. And really, it's already been named that, but trying to get the finances to really develop Meridian.
Yes.
Malcolm X.
Yeah, but to get, we were on the precipice of getting the monies necessary to do a really makeover. But I doubt if we'll get that now with this administration being in. But, life isn't going to end in 4 years. You know what I'm saying? They got 4 years. Hey, let them do their thing. We need to do our Black thing right now.
Right.
Because there's a war going on between the other side. There's a war between the Germans, which Trump represents, and the Zionists and other elements, which is represented by certain banking interests, investment housing, and international corporate structures, right? And then you've got the what do you call it, the military-industrial complex in the midst of all of that. But most people never think of Germans being powerful in America. But the largest white ethnic group in America is Germans. And most people don't know that. Every time I say it to people, they go like, what are you talking about? Yeah, we say white, and we just forget about the makeup of the group, right? But the largest white ethnic is Germans. And they predominate in all the states that Trump, the critical states he won in Pennsylvania, he got 95% of the German vote. Wisconsin, he got 95% of the German vote. In Milwaukee, he got something like 90% of the German votes. And that's replicated wherever there's large German populations. Okay. And then he got, of course, when we think of Central South America and the consciousness of the white-skinned Latino, he got that vote, 70%. They come out of these dictatorship and oligarchy type of governmental structures, these police state and military states. And so Trump was appealing to them. And so we understand that. But we've got to always be willing to study history, study culture, study other people's culture too, because you want to know what's coming after you, study other people's values, but know your values, know your principles that was left. Some people, I was with a brother last night, I was talking on a show with some brothers, and they were saying, well, we had all those things in Africa and it didn't help us. Yeah, but we didn't have guns when they invaded us. And we didn't have the hatred for life that you can come in a village and kill 1,000 women and children and walk off and eat a chicken sandwich or whatever they ate. We were not in a murder culture. We did not come from a murder culture.
Right.
And we didn't think, we didn't think other human beings would do that to other human beings. But we got a surprise. But we know now what we're up against.
Right.
We're not going to be in a state of shock anymore. We're not going to be caught thinking, this is my brother, this is my sister, because they stand upright. There's a different value. There's a different interest. There's a different principle that makes up his consciousness. And we need to master that. As we master the values, interests, and principles that should make up our consciousness. Hey, Nat, where's the rest of them? My kids and grandkids are just coming back from Holland.
Okay.
Hey, lady, what's happening? You want to get on TV? That's a little baby girl.
Hi.
Natalia. That's the thin Gothi, and that's Father Haki. You had a good weekend? Okay. Bye. And this is Mr. King. I got to greet everybody that's just coming back home.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Yep. Hi, Sister Betsy. And this is Mr. Mary.
Hi, Mr. Mary.
Hello, hello.
Okay. And this is my daughter, Miss Betsy. So,
Hi.
Hey, Pops. Hi.
Hello, hello.
So they represent the fact that family is at the core of everything in African culture. You know, even though we're in this society and we have a lot of problems, like I said, my dad left when I was like 3 years old. Things fall apart. But we've got to know what it should look like. That's why you study history. Yes, it fell apart, but how do I rebuild it? Right? What should it look like? Right? And don't mean you have no easy trip. Me and Carol have been together 53 years. We argue almost every day about something. You know what I'm saying? But we also work to maintain a family, get all these kids through college. Every one of our children have at least a master's degree. And every one of them are working in the interest of Black people in whatever industry they find themselves in. So you got one's teaching, the other guidance counselor, one is a principal, one is in the music industry. Wherever they are, though, they are working for our interests. They're Black nationalists, even when they got to disguise themselves. Because I demand no less. Want to walk at my side and call me daddy. One that was just in there, he's a medical administrator. His wife is in the legal profession. So, well, it doesn't matter what skill you got, just put that skill to use for the development of the economic, politics, and culture and the spirituality of your people, wherever you are. And that may manifest itself differently. Everybody can't always wear traditional clothing, because of the environment we're working in. But you can have a traditional mind.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? No matter what work you do. You and I we've got a common background. We were in the military. And I advocate every day that young Black men and women, if you're not going to college and you don't have a skill set that you can go to work, join the U.S. military. People say, I don't want to join the military. You're a fool. If you don't understand all of the values you can get from that versus the value you're going to get standing on the street corner unemployed. All right? To make money. Because after a certain age, you're going to get with some sister and you're going to mate with that sister and you're going to have some children and you don't have a way to take care of that family. Use what you have. Malcolm said, by any means necessary. I tell Black young men, go and join the post office, join the police department, join the fire department. Those are the instruments and the infrastructure that runs the community. You rather sit back and complain about the racist cop, then go and become the cop. Then you don't have to complain about the racist cop anymore.
Exactly.
And so when you say that, and then you say that you're a Pan-Africanist and a nationalist, people look at you cross-eyed because they don't understand what Pan-Africanism and nationalism is. When I watch the Zionists work, those folks are nationalists, okay? And we may not like what they're doing, but they're using a nationalist ideological approach to doing what they're doing. And they're using their religion as culture to bond them together to get that done. And we have to learn to do that. That's one of the things Malcolm taught us. He went all over Africa. He didn't just travel to the Muslim parts of Africa. He traveled to Ghana. He traveled to Nigeria. He traveled to Gambia. He traveled to Tanzania. He went looking to see how can we build a relationship with these people who we haven't seen for 500 years, whose culture we no longer know, whose language we no longer speak. We know we belong to the same race. But how do we build this relationship? And he figured it out. And for that, they killed him. He had some young brothers in Tanzania, and they figured we're going to take this thing before the United Nations. What's the brother's name?
You said Tanzania or Kenya?
Kenya. I don't know. I keep saying Tanzania. In Kenya.
You mean the one that
they killed him on the same day they killed Malcolm?
Pika Botu? Let me see.
Not Pico. I don't know, brother Pico.
Is it Naire?
No,
No.
he was in Tanzania, and Malcolm was learning from him. But there was a young brother of East Indian background in Kenya,
Okay.
East Indian and African background, and they assassinated him on the same day that they assassinated Malcolm. But we didn't know that because we were over here. And then there was another brother named Mr. Cummings, who was the ambassador from Guyana, who was also helping to bring him before the UN. They said he fell out of his hotel window in Manhattan a week later. You know? And all in all, they killed about 20 people after Malcolm was assassinated.
Wow.
Who were associated with Malcolm. But most people don't know about it. A few writers have written about it. But one of the key things that the system that we end up calling the State Department, the CIA, the FBI, went after Malcolm for, and early before he left the nation, when Malcolm raised the murder of Patrice Lumumba in 1961. We now know that with the release of all the files, that it was President Dwight David Eisenhower that gave the orders to have Lumumba killed. All right. And we knew that John Kennedy won the election and was coming in the office, and he had heard the rumor Kennedy did not want it to happen. So they didn't tell Kennedy until after he had been killed. He had been killed a week before they let Kennedy know that they did it. Right. And so I forgot the guy, one of the Dulles brothers, who were the founder of the CIA, went to Africa and oversaw the assassination. They used Belgian and French mercenaries to do it. Now, all this is a matter of national and international record. Now, everybody in the world knows. So most people are not paying attention to it. And so now, when we think of Malcolm raising the issue of the Congo in 1961, with the death of Patrice Lumumba, there's so many other little pieces we don't know. That Patrice Lumumba was a student of Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah was a big student of John Henry Clark. Okay, and Nkrumah and Lumumba had decided that if Lumumba gets to be the president of the Congo, then Lumumba and Nkrumah was going to create a union between Congo and Ghana with Lumumba as the head. They put this in writing. We didn't know about it, but the enemy knew about it. The man who's the current president of Congo today, father was part of the group that helped murder Patrice Lumumba. You understand what I'm saying? The things are still very connected. So this M23 that they're trying to tell me and you are the big villain, they're not the villains. Don't fall for that. They're saying the head of Rwanda is really the troublemaker. That is a bunch of bull.
Right.
All right. And M23, those people are Tutsi people who have lived in the area they're now calling Congo for thousands of years. When the British and the Belgians and the Germans agreed to annex that part of Rwanda to Congo because of its wealth, nobody said nothing about it. And this was even after the Berlin Conference. They annexed all those people to Congo, but the leadership in the Congo never recognized them as Congolese. And so these Tutsi people were always oppressed. Some Hutus as well were there. That's who make up M23. There's an ethnic war going on, not a war to steal natural resources. But all of the South African companies are there. We're not saying they're stealing natural resources, right? In the Goma area. All of the American companies are there. All of the Canadian companies, the French, the British. We're not accusing them of anything. Yet there's over 120 militia groups killing our people all over Congo, working for all of these white people.
Wow.
And nothing is being said about it. Malcolm would have spoken on it, right?
Right.
And so I feel like I got to do what Malcolm said do. I'm speaking on it. You know? And that people need to do the research. And you'll find the linkages and the relationships. And then Trump, 4 weeks ago, that he was going to reach out to Congo and try to do the same extortion piece he did with, where's the war in Europe? Ukraine. They said, we'll come and help you get some peace, but you got to sign over your mineral rights to it. That's called extortion. Just straight up extortion. And so he's trying to do the same thing in the Congo with that bomb that's a leader He's saying he's going in and acquire contracts for the mineral rights, and then he'll bring the American army in and deal with M23. Let them go in there. They won't come back out walking. This is not going to be Afghanistan. You know, those jungles take care of themselves. You know? And so we need to study what's going on in Africa. And you study that M23, they're not Rwandese. They're Congolese people who happen to be Tutsis who have been oppressed for almost 100 years. Okay? And they're fighting for their freedom and their self-determination. But because they've taken over the areas that the Western mind is considered to be sacrosanct to them, and they brought in these Romanian mercenaries, and the brothers kicked their butts, captured all of them, the ones they didn't kill. And so they send the South African army up there with their stupid self, under the guise they're going to help the government of Congo, but they're really there to protect the white mining interests of South Africa. Okay? So we need to study these things. Someone who did a beautiful dissertation on it is P.L.O. Lumumba. P.L.O. Lumumba speaking on the Congo. He does a couple of excellent dissertation on this whole subject. But Malcolm looked at that subject many years ago and he saw it. But the reason he was killed so immediately, so quickly after he had gotten back from Africa, because there was a meeting that was about to jump off in Algeria. Algeria had just defeated the French in the Algerian War for Freedom and was led by a man named Ahmed Ben Bella. Ahmed Ben Bella called a meeting of the non-aligned nations. That was all of the African nation, Asian nation, which had just come into freedom within the last 5 to 10 years. It wasn't aligned with the East nor the West. And so he called the meeting of that group. And Malcolm X and Ernesto Che Guevara were to be the keynote speakers. And that was to happen 2 weeks from the time he got killed. And certainly the US government would not want him addressing that group. Because America, that was the midst of the Cold War. America was trying to recruit that group into their camp. Russia was trying to pull them into their camp. Mao was trying to pull them into the Chinese camp. Malcolm would have messed up the American chances altogether. And so they couldn't allow him to make that speech. So even a few weeks before he died, they came and offered him money, and Malcolm turned them down. That was the coup de grace. They knew they couldn't frighten him. And now they knew that even though they had tried before, now they'd come with big money. And he turned down their big money. And so J. Edgar Hoover gave the word, do something about him. What do you think that means when the head of FBI tell you to do something about a black man that they consider to be politically dangerous?
Plausible.
Do something about them. 2 weeks later, he was dead.
Plausible deniability, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But the point is, Malcolm came, and in that short period of time, it gave us a lot to learn from, to study from. Let's learn and listen to his speeches, listen to his economic analysis, listen to his political analysis, listen to his social analysis, listen to his historical analysis, listen to his spiritual analysis and his ethical, moral analysis. They're all in his speeches. Sometimes we just, for most people, it's just enough to see his picture and use the X. But no, read his speeches. There's multiple books and pamphlets all over the country that you can buy with his speeches in them. And study the mind of the man we call Malcolm X. That 39-year-old young man that took the 19 bullets on our behalf. That's who we're talking about.
That's it.
So in Nkozia, he would have loved you because you're strong and you're a young lady. You're powerful, strength. I know I don't know you as well, but I know you a little better than you think I know you. I see your strength. I see your power, and you have a right, to be anything you want to be in this world. Anything you want to be, and then nothing or nobody stops you. I even encourage one of my best friends in Ghana. till I found out he was the CIA station chief. Right?
Wow.
Danny McGee. They know, Danny, I'm calling your name, but hey, you took the job. You know? I don't even object to those jobs. The people should take all those jobs. But we have to learn how to be a part of the infrastructure of the society we're in. If you allow them, and that's what they're trying to shift back to, where they push us out of the infrastructure.
Exactly.
And they control all of the means of power. And it doesn't matter what you believe or how much money you got with your black skin, you can't do nothing about your way of life. So we've got to become a part of the entire structure. Run for political office at the local level. Run for political office at the state level. Build political parties. If we can't remove the Democratic Party, join the Democratic Party and become the majority at the local level. And you can determine what the state and the national leadership is. You know, we have to learn how to master local politics. You know, learn the election laws of each state. Learn the election laws of each city. How to put together a petition to run. Suppose you say in Nkozia, tomorrow, Jim, I want to run for political office. Then it's okay. We have to get petitions. Do we know where to go to get petitions? Right? And how do you fill out the petitions? And how you then seal and fold. You got to fold the thing just right. Then you got to seal it just right. And all of these things, if you do any of those things wrong, they throw your stuff out, right? And all those laws are made to keep us from being able to get control in this thing. We must master those tools. How to get on the ballot. How to get the petitioning to get on the ballot. How to organize in small cell groups, neighborhood people to work to get you elected to office. All of these things. How to do the research on the economics that should be coming to your community that other people are stealing using not-for-profit organizations. And so the not-for-profit organizations, even though we've won political power, the not-for-profit organization run by white people but have black faces in them are running the politics in the black community because they got the money and the manpower to help the people elected to office. Let's study that infrastructure and how it's negatively impacting our community.
Yes.
And then get out there and do our thing. I mean, we've done extraordinarily well. I mean, I don't have any heavy criticism about African American people's political and social achievement over the last 100 years. You know, we've gone up against the biggest monster in the world. And we've won some major victories. We've had some defeats. We got our butts whipped a few times, but we whipped their butts more than a few times.
Wow.
In multiple ways. And we must continue to do it. And it's you young people. It's really your ball. The ball is in your court. And identity and culture is at the core of your victory. Identity and culture is at the core of your victory. And so if we understand that, because identity is a deep thing, it isn't just the color of our skin.
Right.
You know, that's the prerequisite. That's the door opener. But identity has to do with your lineage relationships, meaning to your ancestors, and the values, interests, and principles that they discovered and held sacred, that they know will keep you bonded and glued together. Identity. And culture helps inform and ensures identity. And spirituality helps to govern that identity. And history got all of that in the package. Know your history, we erase the mystery. That's my little pathetic term.
Right.
So Nkozia, I'm hoping I'm going to see you back in Africa someday.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll be there this year.
But talk to us about you young folks. Where do you want to see Africa go? Where do you want to see the African American and the African Caribbean people? You know?
I want to know how we can better mobilize and organize ourselves, because as of now, I mean, I understand that you don't have a critique of the African American community, but I have critiques like the fact that someone, going back to Elon Musk, this $33 billion that he just gave himself, that's economic warfare, as he's solely tied to oppression, but you have African Americans who are buying Teslas. You have Africans who's buying Teslas. And even in Ghana, you have the Katanka car. Like, people can purchase the Katanka car, but instead they purchase like European cars, and of course they're cheaper, whatever. But like
lack
that
of consciousness. Lack of consciousness come from a lack of knowledge of history. What other people will have this kind of relationship with their genocide and murderers? Does the Jews have that kind of relationship with Nazis? No.
Absolutely not.
No, because they know their history. They celebrate it every week. They got a holiday celebrating themselves. Look on your calendar. They got more holidays than anybody. What are those holidays doing? Celebrating significant moments in the times and history of that group. What does that give them a chance to? To constantly reinforce to themselves who they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And we have to do the same thing. The enemy disbanded our spiritual institution. You go to Africa, and most places you go, and you talk about traditional African religion, and the first thing they tell you, you're talking devil worship. Okay? They're scared. That's juju. I don't have nothing to do with juju. Everything about African indigenous, no, they're going to hurt you with that. If we could hurt you, why the hell do we hurt the colonialists? You know what I'm saying? It's so stupid. But that's what colonialism do to your mind. That's what slavery do to your mind. Our job is to undo that. We have to give a rebirth to African consciousness. It is not an easy task. It is not an easy job. But that is the job. And once we recognize that that is the job, then it becomes easy, because it becomes what you do and who you are. Nothing that I've done have been a stress or strain to me. Even when people tried to take my life, I've been arrested. I've been beat up. I've been on my knees with the pistol in my mouth. You know, I had all of those things happen to me. But one thing I knew in my brain, that I was never going to surrender, never going to betray. I was never going to give in. I would die first. And I was scared. I can't lie. So I was trembling like a dog who knew they were about to die. And I've seen animals, when they know they're about to die, they start trembling uncontrollably. And yes, I've been there, but I still didn't confess to nothing. I didn't give up anybody. I've been laying on the floor in LAX. You know where that's at? LAX. A shotgun in my hand, on my belly, and a 45 at my side, and a box of ammunition on the other side, with my comrades, with LAPD is coming towards us. When the FBI interceded, that close to massive destruction. We would have taken some of them down too. All of my comrades who was with me that day have been killed since. But it's always been freedom or death. That's what Dessalines told us in Haiti, and Malcolm lived according to the freedom of death. He said the secret to life was to have no fear. When you do have fear, just remember that fear is there to inform you to be cautious. It's a barometer to caution, not a paralysis of giving up.
That's true.
Beautiful.
So, Malcolm X, yeah, brother, you're going to be 100 years old. You are alive and well. Your teaching is still informing the world. Your image is still informing the world. The strength that you showed and stood up is still being admired by our youth. And I just tell them, don't be afraid. The tool, the sword, the weapon that you have in your hand is your history. Use it, and you'll see how powerful it is. Because in that history is your culture. In that history is your emotions. In that history is your love. Because those who loved and sacrificed for you, they are talking to you. That history will inform and instruct you how to return to your culture, how to return to your sacred science, so you can restore your African consciousness. And then you know what to do with your money. Last year we met 1.6 trillion we spent with our enemy mostly. 1.6 trillion, there shouldn't be an unemployed black person in America. With 1.6 trillion, we should own how many mines in Africa? All right? Build how many hospitals? Construct how many freeways? But if you misuse it because you don't have a mind of your own, you have a sick, warped mind of your enemy. Dr. Noble says we suffer from a shattered consciousness and a broken black identity. A shattered consciousness and a broken black identity. And he said one of the reasons we suffer from that is because we have been infected. We've been infected by a European mimetic ideology. And we must use African culture as an antiseptic, as an antibiotic, get rid of the infection of the European mimetic culture that mislead, misguide, miscontrol our consciousness, so that we can give a new birth, a rebirth to African consciousness. Which means all African consciousness means I will operate in my group's best interest. Because my group's best interest is my personal best interest. And you don't have to wear that shiki to do that. You can run around in the nude if you wanted to. You can be in your bathing suit. You can have on your three-piece suit. I mean, sometimes you see me, I got on a tuxedo and I'm, bow tie, and I'm hanging out downtown, raising money to feed poor black people in Africa. That's what it takes.
Right.
That's what it takes. And then I can be in another spot and I got on my nice booba and I'm cool there. Or I can just have on my jeans and my sweatshirt like I got today. And my little red, black, and green hat. Or I can take it off and show my bald head. But at the end of the day, it's who is inside of this bald head that is significant and important. And who's in there is my ancestors. Because I'm them going forward. No longer here, you, Nkozia, is me and all of them going forward. You should inherit us, but you got to know us to inherit us. That means you got to study the history to get to know us.
I'm studying, yes, sir.
Right. I'm proud of you. Very, like I said, you're a powerful young spirit. Powerful young spirit.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I definitely appreciate this. I'm not sure how much time you both have. I just wanted to be considerate. Certainly, we appreciate.
We can go until 10.
Oh, okay. You good, Nkos?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Look, let's talk a little about the Queen. We talk about Malcolm, but on top of his body is buried the Queen, Sister Dr. Betty Shabazz. And she was an most extraordinary woman, and she kept the fight to keep her husband's name alive and his teaching alive. Like, as we approached May, she would travel all around, even though she was a doctor person and taught at Medgar Evers, was an administrator at Medgar Evers College in the City University of New York. She would take time off and travel all around this country, especially to the schools that was named after Malcolm, and raise funds all through the year for those schools and for those children. And she would always stop at the last. She would be in Detroit, then she would come to Newark, New Jersey, where she would land on the 18th, and on the 19th, she would always come to Harlem and do a rally, which I would be a part of at the church where Malcolm was buried. Because, no one else would take the body. And this man named Bishop Charles had a church on 147th Street and Amsterdam Avenue that I would let the funeral be done at my church. Because no one else wanted to take the body. They were so afraid.
Oh.
And so we'd go to that church every year. The church has since moved. The bishop had passed away. But we would help raise funds for the school. They also had a school there. And so she did that kind of work. Anywhere somebody was fighting for justice in the street, she was there. She was very close to Sister Merle Evans. She was very close to Dr. King's wife. And the three of them spent a lot of time together helping our communities all around the country. I don't think those three women get credit, Coretta, Merle, or Sister Betty, get the credit they deserve from us or in media. But we need to learn and remember them, because Malcolm wouldn't have been able to do none of the things he did if it wasn't for those women, from his mothers to his sisters to his aunties to his wife, who helped support him to go forward and do that work. And we should never forget them. We should always remember them, going forward. Because right now we're seeing great female leadership rising up all over Africa. You know, we've seen the vice president of Ghana is a woman. The president of Tanzania is a woman. The new president of Namibia is a woman. The president of Barbados is a woman. And I think we got a couple of other female vice presidents on the continent, and they're not walking in silence either. These sisters are speaking out and taking a strong position. Thank God that the Black man is waking up and understanding you can't build a nation if you suppress your woman.
Right.
You cannot build a nation if you marginalize and minimize your woman. You know, Europe do that because they were willing to do any brutality in the world to maintain power. But we cannot go forward without the mind and the spirit of the Black woman at our side, and in many instances in front of us, if that's what it takes.
So speaking of that, I'm kind of curious on what is your take on securing the African family again and bringing that man, woman, child, and even your extended family working in one unison when you see a lot of division.
It has to be your goal.
Okay.
First thing, are you married yet?
No, sir, I'm not married yet, but soon it's coming.
Make sure your choice is quality and character.
Yes,
and
sir.
it's African conscious. Because
Yes, sir.
one of the things that tear us apart is we don't have these discussions in the beginning of relationships. The discussions around consciousness, the discussions around history, the discussion around belief. And we find people that we love for other qualities, but the qualities that's going to tear you apart, you'll find will be the cultural ones and the ideological ones.
Yep.
You know, because you can always find someone who you're going to be attracted to, you know, who's going to be attracted to you. That energy is there. That's just the introductory energy. You see, then the next thing is the attachment to. That's the step after introductory. But where is that energy? That's a longevity. That energy comes from, I got to get to know you and you got to get to know me before I give you too much of me. A lot of times we get so emotionally and sensually involved that we are locked up to each other, even though we don't even agree with each other, principally, spiritually, and ideologically. So try to have those discussions with your mate. Let's talk about what our belief system is. Let's talk about what our future plans is. What do we dream for ourselves in the nation? What do we dream for our children when we have them? Have those discussions way up front, so you know who you're walking with, talking with. Don't take it for granted. You know, you're a beautiful woman. I would lie to you all day long. Okay, so you know, so make sure you're sitting down having this conversation.
Okay.
You understand me without me being critical, because I'm very graphic with my children, you know. And I got four, I got 1, 2, Jesus, 3, 4 girls, 4 girls and 2 boys. And so I don't just talk about birds and bees. I'm very, very clear. I speak to my girl children, my lady women children. Even now, you know, they're all married and a couple have been divorced, and we still have these conversations, you know. And so you got to have the real conversation, because right now you got to say, okay, how is this going to be when my hair is gray and my breasts are sagging and my hip ain't tight no more and my knees shaking when I'm trying to walk? How's this going to be? You know,
Right.
how's this going to be when I get a little bit of fat around my waistline? How's this going to be? You know, have that conversation. Don't be scared to have that conversation. What is it you love about me? You know, where are we going together? We know we want to build a home. We want to live in this place. We want to develop an income level so we can survive. We want to have children. But what is our belief system? What is our spiritual system? Because some people who are Christians and traditionalists can make it together, but most don't. Some people who are Muslims and Christians can get married, but somebody has to change somewhere along the way, you know. So trying to find develop them while you're young, develop the common things you need to glue you together. And I swear in Nkozia, it starts with knowing the history together, studying the history together, studying the spiritual system. You don't have to come, because you can really use Christianity for spiritual development if you know what you're doing, if you're willing to study, if you're willing to read, you know, if you're willing to because a lot of our stuff is in it. You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
nobody tells you it's there. Don't show that it's in the literature. And if you study the literature, you'll almost always leave the church, because there was nothing in the intent of the early teachers was the establishment of this thing we call the church. That became the European way of controlling things. People were saying as each individual to recognize the divine in themselves. You can find that in Corinthians and multiple other places in the book, including coming out of the mouth of the so-called Christ. But if you don't know those things, you won't know how to use that tool. It's just a tool. But it's been a dangerous tool for us because we were forced to come into a belief of it rather than a knowing of it. Right? So those little things becomes important along the way, you know. Do things together. Don't do things separately. Even though me and Carol have made it this far, we spend too much time apart. You know, she was a medical doctor. She went to medical school. We had children throughout that period. I stayed home to take care of children, worked through jobs, selling stuff on the streets, and doing whatever we had to do. But we didn't spend the time we should have together. You understand? And so
Yes.
you wait till you get old before you start getting to know each other on the real thing. When all of the beautiful things you could have done for each other got left on the wayside because you weren't together with one another. And so we see with Malcolm and Sister Betty, strong bonds. And I think both of them being in the Nation of Islam and being Muslims when they met enhanced the strength of that marriage, you know. And so marriage was invented by Africans. And it was very simple to hold the man and the woman who produced the children responsible for raising the children, and to hold that in the community. That's you have a wedding, so the community witness your agreement to take care of one another and held you responsible for that. That's what a wedding is. That's why you have all them other people there. Otherwise, you just go in a room and get a preacher and go and get married and keep it moving. Save a whole ton of money, you know. But you have a wedding and invite the community in so that they can be witness to your agreement to one another. Be witness to the fact that you have responsibility for them children. And if you don't meet those responsibilities, they will hold you responsible. But at the same time, they're there for your counseling and guidance if you need it. And so family became the core of civilization. It is the centerpiece of a civilization. And when I say family, I'm talking about the union between the male and the female. I'm not talking about those other kinds of arrangements that Europeans seem to be making for themselves. I don't know what the problem is. I'm not that smart, but I know what the problem is. Ain't normal for me. It was not normal for my ancestors. And it was not suitable for building a stable society based on ma'at, truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, and reciprocity. And to understand cosmology and ecology and see how we fit in nature, following the laws of nature, because those are the only laws that mean anything. Right? Mm-hmm. And so our ancestors knew family was essential and important, because you can't have no baby unless you have a seed of a man in your womb to fertilize your eggs. Now they got new technology where they can keep the penis from entering you, and they can take a needle and put the seed in you, but you still got the seed of the man that fertilized that child. And a man can't have no baby unless he gives that seed to you, because you can't give your egg to him. Okay? So nature created an institution and a process that tells you what relationships should be. And when that seed from the man, seed from the woman, or the egg from the woman and the seed from the man come together, y'all replicate yourself. And in replicating yourself as your child, you've replicated your grandparents as your child, your great-parents as your child, and your great-great-parents. And if you go backwards long enough, you have brought millions and millions of cells, millions and millions of DNA together in one package, full of all of that possibility that we don't even begin to tap because we've grown up in a world that teaches us to do foolishness with 90% of our mind, 95%.
Mm.
Instead of tapping into that hidden cosmic memory, that astral memory of our ancestors that dwell in all of us.
So that was going to be my final question on the 60th anniversary of his assassination. How can we best honor Malcolm X's legacy by fostering a deeper comprehension of African spirituality and its role in resistance against systemic oppression? Specifically, when you're talking about ancestors, it's like, you know, how do we tap into that cosmic ancestral lineage when a lot of it has been, you know, paper genocide, actual genocide, eugenics has been wiped away of what
it's not wiped away. It's only wiped away from your conscious world, but not from your subconscious world. No, your genetic.
The subconscious world.
Yeah. Well, I give you the simplest tool possible. Study your history. Start with the history of your family. Who's your mama? Who's your daddy? Who were their parents? Who were their parents? Who were their parents? Where were they born? What did they go through in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, California, New York? What did they go through to become who they were? And then you expand into Africa, you know. And today we got all of the technology to do the gene search and stuff. And some of us get lucky. We found our family. I had a sister, she was Puerto Rican. She went with me on one of the trips to Ghana. And I was talking to her husband, James, last week. And she remembered one name that her grandma used in Puerto Rico. And so I called Ghana and gave that to my travel people, Kwame and them. And they found the priest and a linguist. And we found this lady's family in Ashanti. We went to the village, you know. And when we rolled up to that village, it was the day they were having a funeral. But all of the royalty left that funeral and let that go on separately while they came and created a whole nother ceremony for their great-great-granddaughter, born in Puerto Rico, returning home because she remembered that one name, that one old lady.
Wow.
In San Juan. So we know our people are there. You know, when we left there, we left our uncle, our aunties, our cousins. You know what I'm talking about? Sometimes we left grandma because she was too old to go into slavery, grandpa. And so they kept producing our family members that we don't know. But in our genes, we know them. And so your question is, how do we tap into that? Studying history is one of the main things. That's the first step. But learning the spiritual systems. Like, for instance, there'd be the Yorubas, because the Yorubas was the largest, one of the Yoruba wars was at the end when the slave trade was ending, right? So many of their prisoners of war were the last group to be brought over here, right? And so that's why they were the last layers. Under the Yorubas, the Akan, the Ewe, the Congolese, the Angolan, and so forth. But the Yorubas, the last layer, that's why we remember so much of their tradition. Candomblé, Bokaria, Santeria, Hoodoo root in the South. These traditions we maintain because they were the last element. Even though we contain a lot of the elements for some of the other culture, they become primary. So start there. Study, don't join nothing until you've studied it. Read the literature. There's buku literature now on the Yoruba tradition. And if you need me to help you with a bibliography, you can call me. We can do that. So you can understand if somebody says, you've heard people talk about their Oshun. And every attractive woman I've ever met who's physically attractive think they are Oshun. Most of them are not Oshun, but because we think like we think Western religion. So Oshun represents the sensual, attractive young woman with the music and stuff. And so everybody, young women want to identify with that, but that may not be where your consciousness is. But what is Oshun? She's not just sexuality. She's not just physical beauty. Oshun at its core represents intuition, the intuitive nature of the human being. How do you develop that intuitive nature in the human being? That's what the knowledge of Oshun is all about. Or Yah, the top sister with the locks who practiced polyandry and had 2 husbands. But Oshun means change for the purpose of transformation. She's the transformer in the human consciousness, right? Because she's change and process. And that's why she marries Ogun, because Ogun is transformation as a result of change. And that's why she marries Shango. Shango is the recognition of the fact that I need to change. You understand? And so these are metaphorical, anthropomorphic tools to teach us concepts, ideas, and principles. Right? So we don't worship objects. Those are teaching tools. Because we didn't have books in libraries where we have today. Reading wasn't necessary in the way we use reading today. So those symbols were our libraries. And interpreting them was our reading process. And so study anything I can do to help you, of course, and even referring you to other good teachers in your area, I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you. I appreciate
it. Because when you go there, and you've been in and out of Ghana, so you may know a little bit about the Obosun. The Obosun is the same thing that we call Orisha. It's the same thing we call in ancient Egypt the Netters. It's the same thing we call in Haiti the Loas. These are simply the anthropomorphic symbolism that our ancestors developed to explain certain concepts, ideas, and principles to help us develop and grow as the best human being that we could be. You know? And so in one way, the things we're calling African religions is really our sacred spiritual university.
That's true.
I hope that was helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
Well, you're so welcome. And Malcolm actually did the same thing with Islam. In Islam, they have something called the Pearls of Faith, the 99 names of Allah. But it's the 99 Orishas. It's the 99 Loas. But no Muslim will tell you that. Okay? And most of them don't even study the 99 pearls, the 99 names. They're just into this whole Arab cultural praying motif. And there's a difference between Islam and Arab culture. And one has to know enough about the history of Islam to know where Arab culture intrudes upon it and has gotten a higher shelf than the actual spiritual system itself. But anyway, and I was an imam, and I thought I was a very good one and a very good teacher. Matter of fact, I know I was. So I'm going to let you guys go. I know my wife says she was on that computer last night talking to people until midnight, and you got up in England at 9 o'clock, and then be back on. Happy to see you. You know, you and I need to get to know each other better.
Yes, sir.
And we will.
All right.
Study and keep doing your research.
Yeah.
Always walk in the world, being careful. You can always, I tell everybody, set up a shrine for your ancestors. You know, not even a shrine, an altar. And that's just a place where you display their photographs or their names. And what is the purpose of that? To stimulate memory.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see someone's picture, it brings back memories. And when you dialogue with them, you open even more memories up in you of them.
Mm.
And then you will find that, what would grandma have told me to do with this circumstance, with this problem I'm bringing to her, if she was really alive? Well, if you meditate deep enough and talk deep enough, you will realize from what grandma's words and consciousness was in your memory, the answer is right there. You know what grandma would have told you, you know, because you can remember how she felt about these things. And so that's one of the easy ways you practice getting in tune with the answer. And you'd be surprised at some point, you don't have to do nothing. You know that one speaks to me. I feel it. I know it's that one. Then sometimes you start seeing them in your dreams, and they communicate with you in your dream. But you got to listen. You got to listen to them. You can't say, "Oh, yeah, I saw it, yeah, and then you go the other way." No, meditate, study, listen, ask. Why did y'all come to me last night and say that? It means me going to sleep again, taking a nap, take on it easy. Do it. We don't have no problem with other cultures using yoga to meditate. We don't have no problem with other cultures sitting and meditating for hours and hours. But and we see it as legitimate, but we don't do the same thing. You know? Just create a space for them, treat it with the highest reverence, and go sit and talk to them, just like they were still alive, sitting there listening to you physically. And then you begin to see. Then you begin to know. Then you begin to know.
Yes, sir. I've been hearing that often, actually. So thank you.
Good. So I'm gonna get ready to leave you.
All right. My pleasure.
Good evening, and I was happy to see this little daughter.
Yes,
in Africa. And you know, stay strong, Tim. And little brother, you keep doing what you have to do, and let's get unhappy and let me listen to you the next time.
Sounds good, Bob. Appreciate it. Thank you both. Appreciate the time, and you all both have a good evening, rest of the week, and we shall build again soon.
Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings.